What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown. This is Heresy Financial. The August JOLTS report was just released, and if you aren't aware, JOLTS stands for Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. The month of August set a new record for the number of people quitting their jobs in 1 month. Now, as is probably obvious, this is one of the things contributing to the massive labor shortage across the country. As companies are scrambling to hire more, they can't even hold on to what they already have. So in this video, we are going to talk about number one, what the quitting numbers mean for the economy, and number two, the real reason why so many people are quitting their jobs that nobody is talking about. Ready? Let's dive in. Before we jump in here, I'd like to make a quick note. I've seen a little bit of an uptick in the channels that are getting deleted or deplatformed on YouTube lately. One of them was Anthony Pompliano's a couple of days ago. It was accidentally deleted. They're back up now. And then Ron Paul, former Congressman Ron Paul, his channel was deleted and was denied appeal. So if anything like that were to happen to me, I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to do it on YouTube anymore. Follow me on Twitter. You can sign up for my newsletter. I post every YouTube video. I take the audio from that and post it as a podcast episode everywhere you can find podcasts. It is the Heresy Financial podcast. And so if you are not following me in any other place like that yet, go ahead and just give a quick follow just in case something were to happen. That way you can hear where I land and end up next. All right, so the August JOLTS report was one for the record books. Over 4 million people, 4.3 million people to be exact, quit their jobs during the month of August. And this was the most people who have quit their jobs in 1 month since this data started to be collected back in 2000. To put that number into perspective, that is 2.9%, almost 3% of all employees walked out. Now, if that was equally distributed across all companies, 3% probably wouldn't be that big of a blow. However, as is always the case, it's not going to be equally distributed. You're going to have this focused, and it's going to hit certain industries, certain sectors, certain businesses much harder than others. Now, as you might expect, some of the areas that took the biggest hits are services and restaurants. Now, obviously, this wasn't a net loss of 4.3 million jobs because companies are still hiring. Many of those people who quit went and got other jobs. But every time you as a company hire somebody, you have to go through a training process after you hire them, even if they already have experience. So the more turnover there is, the higher the cost, the more expensive it is for the company. So let's look at some numbers. For food service, we saw an exodus of 892,000 workers in the month of August. In retail, you had 721,000 people who quit. And then in healthcare and social assistance, you saw 534,000 people who threw in the towel. Now, it's worth repeating. Many of these 4.3 million people went out and got new jobs. This means that as employees continue to seek better and better opportunities for themselves, it will provide upward pressure on inflation. So why is that? Well, number one, employees are spenders, and this means spenders will get more income, providing more pressure for sustained or maybe even increased demand. Number two, employees are costs to companies, and as the cost to attract, train, and retain employees continues to rise, those costs will be passed on to customers in the forms of higher prices of the end product. This all begs the question, why now and why still? Because governments aren't paying people to stay home and watch Netflix anymore. And I said many times in the past, which I was wrong, that as soon as governments stopped paying people to stay home, they would go back to work. Well, they're not. And this is leaving many economists just completely baffled, wondering, why are we having this labor problem still? Many of them are pointing to missing childcare or even the fear of contracting COVID as the main reason for the labor shortage right now, which might play a part, but it's not playing 5 million parts. Might have something to do with it, but it's not contributing to 4.3 million people quitting their jobs in August. So here's what I think the real driver is that nobody is talking about right now. Bullshit jobs. Bullshit jobs is a term coined by David Graeber in his book, well, bullshit jobs. Essentially, for one reason or another, many employees for decades now have just had bad jobs. And the fact of the matter is, even if you're getting paid enough to support yourself or even support your family, that is not enough to find your job satisfying. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell points out 3 necessary components for your job to feel fulfilling to you. Number 1, you need some degree of autonomy. So that's like the opposite of getting micromanaged, where you have some say over what you do with your day, the choices that you make, you have influence on the work that you're creating. You have some level of autonomy in the work that you're doing. Number 2 is the ability to experience the fruit of your labor. On one end of the spectrum, think of, let's just say, a farmer who puts in work all season and is able to actually see the food that he grows on his farm at the end of the season, right? That's experiencing the fruit of your labor, quite literally. On the other side of the spectrum, you have somebody on an assembly line who their job is doing something and they're never able to see the final product. Today's day and age, that might be a button pusher or a box checker. There's no connection between your work and the results. And the third necessary component is diversity in your actions. You have to have some level of diversity where you're doing different things and you don't just have one repetitive, endless, meaningless task that you have to do over and over and over again. And without all 3 of these components, it is very difficult to feel fulfilled with your job. I'm sure all of us either currently hold or have held in the past a job that does not fit, doesn't even come close to meeting all 3 of these necessary components. Instead, you go to work to get micromanaged at a job that could be done by a computer program, repeating the exact same meaningless tasks every day. And for the most part, for decades, people in jobs like this have been trapped. There has been a lot of pressure to leave, but just barely enough more pressure to make you stay. But the last year and a half has tipped the balance, providing just enough opportunity and incentive to say, I've had enough. And yes, many of these people are re-entering similar conditions right now. But I can't help but see this as a very positive trend, as be very optimistic about the direction that things are headed. Because for 50 years, it's been going in the opposite direction. For 50 years, workers have become more and more productive. The workforce in America today is the most productive in history, but employees largely have not been able to share in this gain. The top 1% have gotten very wealthy from this, the bottom 90% have not. And while many like Andrew Yang advocate universal basic income as a solution, or like Bernie Sanders advocate higher taxes on the rich and redistribution to the poor as a solution, this is like using the disease to attack the symptom. Because this all started when the government granted itself unlimited spending power in 1971 by closing the gold window, by abolishing the gold standard. From that point on, they could print themselves purchasing power, which comes at the expense of wage earners and savers. This 50-year trend of ever-increasing productivity at the same time as the government had ever-increasing purchasing power that they could print into existence meant that all of that purchasing power was being transferred from savers and wage earners into asset prices. And who has held these assets? The rich and powerful. Now we talk about, from let's say a governmental standpoint, how right now looks like we're near or at peak centralization, top-down control, but corporations, massive companies, have a big part to play in this too. From a job standpoint, things are more centralized now than they've ever been in history. And it's almost impossible to provide a fulfilling job when you have tens of thousands of employees. And now the tables have turned. People are finally leaving their bullshit jobs. And it is forcing employers to share more of that profit with new employees in order to attract and retain talent. And many times that's not even enough. Employees are quitting to become contractors. Workers are quitting to start their own small businesses. More and more people are realizing they can leave the rat race. It doesn't take that much income to live a simple life. And if we are at or near peak centralization, the new economy where small businesses, freelancers, and contractors are the norm and not the exception is the way the world will soon look. And again, this is undoubtedly a good thing. This is fantastic news. While it might not be good for the stock prices of major corporations like the world's largest employer, Walmart, who I have their stock on the screen behind me, kudos to anybody who is able to guess that already, it does mean greater productivity, healthier economy, and ultimately happier people. And just like when humans realized that we could outsource some of our labor of gathering food to fire and extract more nutrients from food, that freed up our time to pursue more productive activities, that was a good thing. And just like during the Industrial Revolution, when we got tractors and we lost all those jobs of having to work the fields and we replaced hundreds of people with one machine, that was a good thing. So inherently, by itself, a current labor shortage, drop in total people that have jobs and that are being employed, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. And given the fact that most of these jobs for years and decades now have been bad jobs, it might be a very, very good thing. And the norm for our kids and our grandkids could be a more decentralized economy with more smaller businesses, better opportunities, and greater freedoms. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.